Hey, what's up YouTube? It's OMFGNinja. I know it's been a long time since I made a video, and I'm really sorry about that. I have something really special for you here today, though. I really need your attention. I really need you guys to check this out. I've been doing a lot of research on Gamergate, and I'm sure that you guys know what that is already, but I found something really interesting. And after I found this thing, I started doing some research on it, and I started digging, and I started looking, seeing what does this thing connect to. And the more I dug on this one particular topic, the more stuff came out. And I realized that I had started to find pieces that nobody else had yet found in this whole Gamergate thing. It's a really long story, but I've spent the last month in just research mode, just digging, looking, Googling, everything I can to get the information out. But I did. I got it. So I believe that I have uncovered the smoking gun of Gamergate. Now I know this is a big claim, but I really want you guys to check out what I have here. And I wouldn't make this video unless I really needed to. And I can't tell you guys how important this is right now. So without further ado, here is Gamergate Smoking Gun.
Also on the webpage. Today we want to talk about shaping play spaces within media cultures. We have Coded Cultures in the second hour who have done a workshop as a satellite event of the Transmedia Hour. They will be presenting the results of their workshop, and we will be talking about this under the heading of shaping play spaces within media cultures. And in the third hour, we will have a presentation from the Amaze workshop, and then we will talk about it. And then on my right, Heather Kelly is already sitting at the table. I'm very glad to have you here. From Moboid is your artist name, correct? Heather Kelly Moboid is a media artist and video game designer who designs games as interface and interactive as a part of interface and interaction research at Concordia University in Montreal, Quebec, and heads her own software design studio called Perfect Plum.
Things. Another level of this project is the conceptual level, or more. This is the level of the responsibility, the level that you have to play or to try to play with a social game. It's more or less in your way, this kind of point of view. The social way, like the social game, sorry, like an experiment, of between the consume and the produce. How you consume and how you produce, and in the same time, how you consume and how you can do or change it's not the kind of character, because in this, they are speaking about the pirates, the Somali pirates in this project. And in the same time, it's really funny because in the end, they are like heroes, they are folk heroes inside of the piece.
And when you bring up rightly Julian Kuchli's concept of flavor, then all of a sudden you're addressing the current situation where these two spheres are mixed. And this is a situation that we have not, fully grasped or analyzed, and that we're just beginning to understand, with some very, some people would say delightful developments, other people would say disturbing developments. When a company like Siemens, for example, has an achievement system, like in World of Warcraft, where you can get little bonus points, they don't give you more money, they don't give you a better job or anything.
Martin. Yeah, well, but that's the fascinating thing about the ludic whatever. If it's an interface, a culture, it's the notion of play and also rules. They motivate you to do things which you perhaps otherwise would not do, but at least they motivate you to do the things you wanted to do better and more effectively.
And this whole issue of control is, I personally find fascinating. I mean, Moises, you said it's ludic because you can change it, right? And I mean, the fact is, I mean, we've become sort of accustomed to interactive media, right? Because they've been around now for 20, 30 years. But that was a big breakthrough 30 years ago. I mean, before all you had was maybe the TV switcher, and then all of a sudden you're interacting with these things. We've become so jaded that all of a sudden, then Michael, now you're talking about fake freedom, right? It's, it's not enough. We want more. We want more interaction. We want to be able to change more. And then Matthias was complaining about or critiquing the loss of control. Actually, you know, I mean, Lord knows there are some very ominous things going on with our data, and you know, I worry about that too. But at the same point, isn't loss of control a very essential part of play? Would anyone agree or disagree with me on that? Yeah?
I still have problems then of finding out how this loss of control is politically useful, because it subverts the whole idea of responsibility. If you don't have choice, if you lose the possibility to control in some way, then how can you get that? Can you make that into a political virtue? It's nice to get lost in a game, but if our whole society changes into a system where you have no clue of how the system works because of a lack of transparency, that is what you were mentioning, and also where our choices are replaced just by, well, be there, show your presence, that's all you can do, then how can you still maneuver in a politically responsible way?
Heather, and then I see one hand.
Okay. I hate to tell too much about what our presentation will be at coming up on 1 o'clock, but we're going to talk a bit about that in the manifesto that we've been working on. But a lot of these issues were what drove us being Torsten and I, to create this, is thinking about how games are very seductive and have this power to change what we do, and are becoming something that's part of everyday life, not simply, you know, something that we can define where is the edge of the interface. They're really just bleeding into everything we do. And how does this apply to, you know, our ability to make educated choices or political action or decisions? Or it's because the promise is so, there is that promise of that enrapturement, and that would potentially games and play could help us achieve certain things, but then there's also that fear that, well, if we can't really see what's going on, we're being controlled by this very powerful psychological mechanism to achieve something, or just the very things that games and play are extremely good at the kind of behavior they're good at causing. So I agree. It's very difficult when there's both this power can be used in different ways. But I think maybe the essence of what we could do about it is make sure that the mechanisms are made visible, or that people do understand that the mechanisms are there, that they're not entirely hidden. Or I'm sure there will be people that have every incentive to hide them, and we need to make those visible and teach people how to recognize that kind of power.
And this brings me as well to the point, because this was a question for us as well when we actually started to think about a title for the thing, and then we came up with the topic of insecure territories. We thought, first of all, we have to kind of create a knowledge base which is maybe also in a way like you ask, in a broader media cultural sense, not so well connectable or accessible, but we have to create some kind of common knowledge in a group, and then how can we kind of transmit this again, because when I talk to people and I say to someone who is not part of the game, like aware of all these networks, then they're like, okay, what are you talking about? So how is it able to break it down to a kind of protocol that is more or less understandable even for every mobile phone user, that, like you said, if you go outside, so it's around you. So these are kind of already very kind of stiffly shaped spaces, but you don't feel them, you don't see them. So, but you are using the technology in a sense, and even we heard in the first hour, like you're accessing a lot of networks, you're using a lot of systems without any kind of awareness about it. And I think maybe from a non-scientific view, it might be a quite well hookup to create some projects which we kind of can select and take this insecure territories project further on the level of creating new prototypes, but on the other hand having some lectures showing some of the kind of technical infrastructures around, and break it down to a level that is as well raising the awareness of every kind of user of the technology and stuff.
Just one question to that. Isn't it more effective to subvert in a different way than talking within this media art context. But like, I was just looking for the name, I can't find it now, this app, which is also was nominated for the Serendipitor. Mark Shepard, Serendipitor. So you can get it on the standard phone, and it disrupts your straightforward navigation system and breaks with this principle. Isn't that more effective than to sit in the closed room in Neukölln?
That would be somehow the way how we kind of develop it further till September is, I'm not sure how much I'm really allowed to say about the plans, but it is something which you with your mobile phone can participate in, but not in a way that you select to be part of the game. You are part of the game because you are in the public space.
At Concordia University in Montreal, Quebec, and heads her own software design studio called Perfect Plum, which I'll ask you about later what that refers to. And then we have Thorsten Wiedemann here from Berlin, a founder and artistic director of Amaze, an event series here in Berlin revolving around the convergence of games, art, and society. Well known as Storno, he has produced talk formats, radio shows, and the legendary Storno 8-bit session, which I might ask you about later. But first and foremost, I would just like to give you a heartfelt welcome, and then I'll give you the microphone, and you'll tell us what to expect in the next half hour, all right?
Okay, thank you very much. I give it first to Heather, and because
as mentioned, I'm Heather Kelly. One of the things that isn't in that tiny bio is that I also co-founded a collective for experimental video games and video games as art in Montreal called Kokoromi. And it was through that connection that I met Torsten last year, I guess, early last year, and came out here for the Game Culture Circle. And we had a really great conversation at the after coffee, after drinks, and just started like talking about crazy ideas that we wanted to do together. And this is the outcome of that, in fact, and it mutated somewhat. We originally were thinking of a workshop type thing, but what we have actually is more of a video sprint, where on a particular theme we did a number of different interviews with people all over Transmediale this year, and we prepared, we had in mind what we wanted to talk about, and it's called Controlled Invasion, and we had a list of questions that all of our interviewees answered, and developed a manifesto about our feelings about games and their ability to, their power to control us, and for us, how do we control them? And just as a little bit of background, both Torsten and I really love games, so it's not to say that we're only negative about them, but we're very concerned and want to explore this. So what you see here is the outcome of our last very, very intense 2 days of working here at the HKV, and putting together both the interviews and the final video itself, and I'm excited.
Yeah, me really surprised that's coming up. It's very playful.
The world
I think,
premiere, world premiere.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Never before seen.
It's always an experimentation, I think, and
we know it'll generate a lot of debate and thought, and so we're looking forward to that.
Yes. So we start. Roll the phone. You want to say it?
No, actually, I just want to say how amazing I find it that your computer did not crash while you were riding here in the car having it render, because that's what they tend to do in those situations. But yeah, no, I'm looking forward to this, and afterwards we will have the possibility to discuss the position you present here, or the positions. I have no idea what to expect, and then we will have an open discussion on everything we've been talking about the last 3 hours and wrap things up. But no, now is your center stage, so I will say nothing more.
Okay.
I believe that gameplay can change real-world behavior. What games do really well is bring a lot of different parts, certainly through creating games also. Games bring a lot of different things together, bring a lot of different types of reasoning into a single space, and that ultimately will have some effects in terms of changing how you think about the world or how you put things together. They're really, really powerful really powerful agents of change, and so I think that collectively, like having discussions like this about, you know, what does the future of games look like and thinking ahead, I think that's probably the most helpful thing that game designers can do in terms of thinking about how best to use their tools to play the game. I mean, I think that this sort of distinction between what we do in our game lives and what we do in our real lives is going to completely disappear. I mean, which really excites me. I think that that's really exciting. In particular, if it's helping with real-world behavior, social interaction, participation, making friends, those sorts of things. And I think that we will be playing lots of games without even thinking of them necessarily as games. That these, how we think about game systems will become so embedded in our everyday existence that we won't even be able to make the distinction anymore between sort of playing a game and living our real lives.
I think it's going to take several decades of people passing away, literally dying, and new people filling their shoes who grew up with Mario and who grew up with, you know, Pac-Man, and maybe even further than that, maybe even people that grew up with Mario Kart, you know, to actually understand that these game dynamics could be civically functional structures for larger, you know, governing bodies. I think that the cross-platform nature of game development and the fact that a game has to function on multiple different consoles even that basic knowledge of that as a technical requirement is something which is missing from the way that we govern, the way that we rule, and I think that those are very strong ethical directions that game design could influence.
Wow. Wow. Thank you very much. I would have a lot to say and a lot to ask, but I don't know. Do you want to say something afterwards, or do we just want to invite the audience to start asking?
The only thing we want to say is to thank the people who did interviews with us and to...
I was immediately struck when you started talking about bringing it into politics and making decisions. And I immediately thought of the Theatre of the Oppressed and Augustus, I can't pronounce his name properly, Augusto Boal, and the work that he did within theatre and using theatre to make political decisions and make people work together on that level. And I don't know if there are lessons that can be learned from there.
I'm sure there are. In fact, that's one thing is, one of our questions is that we asked people was, what can your expertise offer to this question, this ethical question that you may face in common with game design? Because part of the history of game design is we learn a lot about other games, but now it's, I mean, it always was, but I think even more so important to learn about philosophies coming from other fields, not like we had Paul Vanuz, and he was mentioning how things were different for him coming somewhat from the scientific perspective, but absolutely theater and other kinds of activist movements would clearly have things that we could be learning and applying in games and in play.
Tons coming up. People just need to warm up here. Here's number 2.
Just wanted to add something to this political issue. I mean, there was already this book, Nudge. I don't know if you already know that, maybe. So it was not mentioned anywhere that they talk about games, but there are 2 researchers, I think, in the States, which university, I don't know, the book is The Nudge, and it's about how to push people into do certain things. And it's a big discussion going on after that book in political areas, especially conservatives. Oh, wow, that's a great thing. So, and you know, they had no connection already to gaming, but it is in the end what they described there, and the examples they gave, it was small games, and they were very fascinated by that.
It's not just conservatives. Obama was a big enthusiast for this whole nudge concept, and getting back to what the people were saying in the movie, it's all about technology for designing pleasure, enjoyment. You know, on a molecular level, it's all about the release of dopamine and maybe some other molecules. But I mean, that's what game design touches on, and people, you know, doing research into this field touch upon. And very, very important questions that were raised. That's why I like the movie so much. I would like to get to you two and sort of try and find your position in here. And there were these statements in the broad letters, which I guess was your manifesto, and then the statement, the quintessence of the position you wanted to take after doing this workshop, or you know, interview sprint, you called it, I think. And there are 2 points. I don't know if I'm going to do them both now. I'll start off with one. The first one is, there was a statement there. It said, apply the power of game design towards positive results, right? That's a fairly straightforward ethical statement to make. The question is, you know, who defines what is a positive result? And this brings me to...
Torsten and I do, obviously.
Oh, of course. Okay, well, then it's clear. Then that's clear. No, but I mean, the whole question of games and morality, right? I mean, it's in some, you know, lines of thought, game, or let's say play, is conceived to be an immoral sphere, right? Because it's the sphere
or amoral, maybe.
Amoral,
or
yeah.
Do you mean immoral? Maybe you meant immoral.
So yeah, immoral, amoral, not having to, you know, you don't have to heed to moral standards in it. That's the idea. That's very common. I don't agree with that. I would say play is more like metamoral. You can see, oh, there's this moral rule system, and there's this other moral rule system, and I get to choose between them.
You can explore them.
I can explore them, and I can choose. So that's sort of like an ethical stance to take. But that for me, for example, would be the ethical nature of play. But it doesn't fit to something like, what's the positive results I should strive? Doesn't everyone have to decide that for themselves?
For me, is I don't like. I just say what I don't like. I don't like the games industry. I don't like. No, because it's they're doing it for the market. I mean, it's good to use a medium to make money and stuff like that, and to make more money, and maybe to make people addictive. This is not okay. But I really like to have the industry thinking more about, and the game developers thinking more about what they do to the players. Then they give them no backdoor. I mean, there are some people that are losing their money because they are playing all the time the game, and they can't go away. They can't leave the game. And another thing is, I mean, what is a casual game? I mean, it's just fun. And for me, it's not enough just to have fun, because I mean, in real life, I have fun enough. And I mean, a game should have more opportunities, and it should have, always compare it with a movie. Maybe it's wrong, maybe it's, but I think it's right. I think, I don't know how it's somewhere else, but in Germany you have not a real funding system for games. Like, I mean, there's not enough budget to give creative people who are not looking for the market the chance to develop a game. And I mean, I don't know how it is in Berlin, Medienbau Brandenburg. I mean, film is a very old medium and stuff like that, and but just to get more into experimentation and really to get more into this positive game development, not looking just for the market, just to try something new. And this, I think most of the people don't go into this risk because there is no money to get it.
The end, and this kind of thing. But you know, very, very small games rather than consoles, that's surely one way to go, and to make those exciting and fun and different.
Well, I agree that we definitely have to sort of break our minds out of thinking of, well, commercial games as only the AAA games, or as the kind of games. I think that the toward the end of the video, there was some people that started to hint at that the future is not in these screen-only facing the front kind of game interactions, but that they're really much more. They'll become smaller because they're becoming a part of a different experience throughout your day or your life.
This is something we want to shout out, and this is why the context is also behind you. You can always contact us, and we can write a manifesto together. Because I mean, it was the main idea to make a workshop with people together who are interested into these things in talking about ethical gameplay, and yeah, that was not possible. So we reduced it. So and we just invited people to talk with us. But maybe the next step could be to make a website or something like that, and to bring or a game. Why not? But for this we need a lot of money.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about this last question about the game ethics. Maybe it's a solution to put it in the media itself, but on the other hand, what we heard now from the audience, wouldn't it be a helpful guideline to have, because maybe it's in a media evolutionary way when you say film. It took quite a long time that people have this understanding of, let's say, the framing, the roles and everything. So wouldn't it be helpful to have something similar for game ethics, to start a wiki and to kind of point out the dimensions of, and at least maybe come close to something like, I'm not saying a regulation, or at least a protocol where you can, so we are not doing this in the sense of a developer because we think it's ethical, not good in this sense.
I'm fairly certain there already are some initiatives like that. I think one thing that will be hard for game developers to overcome is so far the history of having to separate ourselves from the ethical implications of play, because they have been mostly proposed as extremely dangerous and not neutral, I guess, can you call it? I mean, in the way that gameplay is very powerful, so it can be. Games have gotten so much of a bad rap for the bad things that have been attributed to them incorrectly that it's hard to admit or to own up to the things the powers that they really do have, whether it's for good or not. And the danger is, like, if you admit any kind of responsibility, then suddenly you're taking on all kinds of incorrect and, people are trying to blame you for stuff that isn't the responsibility of the medium. So I think that's the hard part. It's like if we admit or allow for this even small bit of responsibility, then suddenly we're on very dangerous ground. So that's part of why the manifesto is trying to be strongly worded about that, because we have to get over that if we want to own up to the power that they have to do very wonderful things as well.
Just another example I just found lately. I don't know if you guys know the game Hazard, The Journey of Life. And I think it's something like in between, because it's using first-person shooter. You think you're doing a first-person shooter, but it's actually a very artful game. So you walk through a virtual environment which is very well designed and very artful, in my opinion, and you have to solve puzzles, and it arises philosophical questions. So it's, he asks himself, so what can I do using this point of view of a first-person shooter and do it different? So that can be a possibility to break up these ways of thinking about games, that you use a existing pattern like person shooters are bad, and then you put it on, wow, you can ask philosophical questions in a first-person shooter thing. So that was really something which brought in my opinion up, that it's quite interesting to use that. When I shouted do it a game, I think there are already really nice games arising this kind of question, philosophical question, and maybe bring them back to the topic of gaming itself.
I have 1, 2, 3. So okay. So first Michael, then Sebastian,
I have this rather polemical remark since the very beginning in my mouth, but this is a good moment to shout it out. So if you take Karl Marx and the idea of Julian with the Playber, isn't this actually this ludification, gamification of society, breaking up the distinction between play and work? the fulfillment of this vision of not being Entfremdung, I don't know the English, alienated of your work, just as a provocant statement.
Yeah. Well, I'm really sympathetic to the critique of sort of the working together of economy and games and politics in games. I think that's important to analyze and think about. But at the same time, what I kind of missed in your film and in the manifesto was what possibilities actually do open up when you disconnect that. What would you do if you would get the grant to make a game with no strings attached? And my vision for that would be really that we can make games that actually problematize the relationship between game designers and gamers. So that as a game designer, you could make a game that doesn't aim for maximum fun, for maximum replayability, for maximum getting other people involved, but we could actually make games that are maybe kind of boring in some parts, or make games, you know, that sort of where there's a difference between the player and the game, and there's space for players to think about what they're actually doing. And I think to give it a more like positive direction, it would be a good part of the manifesto to sort of formulate visions of what games could be that aren't closely attached to economy or politics. Yeah.
But I think it's there's something positive in there. I see something positive in there, especially in the last sentence, fuck the magic circle. I mean, the word magic circle is something like La La Land, something like, I don't know, we are not childs anymore, and we have to find an ethic. So, and this is a very positive thing, I think.
I'm Sonia. When I was looking at the film, one thing I kept asking myself, where's the aesthetics, where's the play? Okay. And then someone else said, yeah, but it would cost a lot of money to make a game if it was a game instead of a website. And I thought, well, again, it's going to the game and not to the play. And I was thinking, well, you know, the whole thing is about play and the mechanics of the play, the aesthetics. And if you perhaps use the word aesthetics, it's not just about look and feel, but it's the mechanics, the way the interactions happen. You focus on that and not so much on the public or non-public or whatever. I think there's more potential for looking at how does that have a sense of responsibility. And it's not to do with ethics as such, but more to do with the mechanics of how the play works within itself and goes further than itself into some other environment or many environments. And then you can start looking back from that and think, that could be what a new type of aesthetics might or might not be, rather than worrying about whether it's good or bad or positive or negative.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Oh, that's very loud. No, I don't think I agree with your last statement, the fuck the magic circle part, for one simple reason. I mean, it's important to question the magic circle. I agree with you completely on that. It's not, play and games are not as closed off as Johan Huizinga, who came up with the term, would like us to believe. You know, it's much more permeable. It's porous. There are things coming into the games, emotions coming into the games, things coming out of the games. At the same time, I would argue the magic circle is of utmost importance, not as a spatial thing, but as a symbolic difference. Because the moment I don't know I'm in the game anymore, you know, and things are happening like in a game, as one of your people are saying, I would say, you're crazy. You know, so that's a very fine line you're walking along. So I would say we need to think about this a bit more.
Yeah, by this point, I think we all have to wake up and say, okay, we are now in this moment, and we really have to find a solution how we can enter the future. I mean, that the technology is always getting more developed and everything is running faster and faster. That's for sure, and all this holographic stuff, it will happen. I mean, it's not science fiction anymore. You just look at the YouTube videos. I mean, it's. I think we should understand where we are, and when we know where we are, we understand that this is just a game, and this is reality for me.
I guess one thing that was interesting for me in the video was a few people mentioned the idea that they wanted to bring games or some aspects of games into other aspects of social life, so like politics, bringing games into politics. And I guess I would make the argument that it's already there in a way, or at least you could see it that way. I mean, if that politics and commerce and all these things, that they have a certain sort of set of formal rules, and once you have a set of formal rules, then you could call it a game. And even, I mean, it's kind of scary to think about, but game theory, a lot of it really grew up in the Cold War, where people were using it to apply to nuclear strategy. You know, how far could you take it before the game would end? So I guess I would say, well, I'm curious about what real concrete ideas there are about bringing games into, say, politics. You know, how would that be different than what we have now, where people are obviously gaming the systems?
Yeah, that did come up a couple of times in the conversations we had, and it was on a couple different levels. One was, like you said, that really these systems could already be thought of as games, and you could find ways to hack them, in fact. And that perhaps part of the power of understanding or acknowledging the power of these games is, and learning about how they work, is that you can hack them and you can resist them if they're being used to it, and the wrong ends for you. And another thing that was brought up is that it isn't so far away that we could see that instead of well, let's see. I don't use Foursquare actually, but I'm imagining that in the last election there was probably, you could check in on Foursquare at the polling place or something like that. I mean, it's completely conceivable if it wasn't already happening. I'm sure it will in the next one. And that perhaps, how does it change? One of our other questions was, how does it change these sort of acts that we normally consider real world or serious or, life behaviors, that gameplay is then layered on top of them, and suddenly you're getting points in your game, or you're getting virtual currency for the fact that you voted, perhaps for one particular politician or another, in fact, and that it's very easy to see something like that coming our way.
It's a reflexive moment, please.
I'm just wondering, I mean, what you really made me think about here in the discussion is we need a Sex Pistols of the gaming world, in the sense, if you look at the music industry before the Sex Pistols, no one thought that they could break into it. And it's, is Halo the new prog rock? In a sense, I mean, I'm far too old to do this because, no one's going to be interested in what I've got to say. But if you've got people who are young enough and subversive enough to make it really cool to attack this bloated media, then it's something that we could really use, I think.
The answer is yes. They're starting to be the Sex Pistols of video games, but they're not having. They're very popular in their sphere, which is usually indie games. Somebody like Cactus is even directly compared to like a punk rock of video games. But how do you get that to people, and when is it going to not only exist but also sort of tap into that need that people had to hear that when the Sex Pistols hit the scene? They weren't popular just because they were raw and sounded, or sounded angry. It was also because people were really pissed off, and they were able to reach that emotional level. So these kind of games do exist, but how can they reach the audience that would normally not be aware of them because the distribution means are different?
Which I found very wonderful in this movie. I don't know who exactly made the statement that we sort of need, maybe because of this power we all see in this experience design, behavior design technology we developed today. How can we define hippographic ideas for game design? And in order to do that, we need to define what the purpose of games, or our understanding of a possibility of games, means to our human being. And I think if you continue working on this manifesto, I would highly emphasize to work on this point, to shape out an idea what it could mean. And it has to include, of course, the paradox, which is within games. And it also has to include, I don't believe that this getting away from the alienation work would be reachable by colliding. I mean, we all love this idea, you know, of like being paid for just existing, you know, just having fun all the time, whatever. But you need the essential difference between a game or a play status and the real world. If you don't have it, then you're reaching a fascistic system, I would argue. It's very, very dangerous. And yeah, I'm sorry, I just want to say that, and I hope you continue working on that.
Yeah,
really.
I really like to invite you to work with this manifesto, and everybody here. And of course, it's a big point of the manifesto, I think, or to reach a kind of these ethics is that you really work interdisciplinary. I mean, I mean, it's very nice to be here at the Transmediale to discuss something like that with media artists, and it makes more sense than just there are sitting people, game designers together, because they're just nothing. Yes, everything is okay. We are good game designers, we're doing good games, and here you get critics, and this is something what we need.
The answer is yes. They're starting to be the Sex Pistols of video games, but they're not having. They're very popular in their sphere, which is usually indie games. Somebody like Cactus is even directly compared to like a punk rock of video games. But how do you get that to people, and when is it going to not only exist but also sort of tap into that need that people had to hear that when the Sex Pistols hit the scene? They weren't popular just because they were raw and sounded, you know, or sounded angry. It was also because people were really pissed off, and they were able to reach that emotional level. So
The UN has identified several factors in overcoming poverty, and one of the problems is violence against women. With a lot of the programs that have been developed so far to combat violence against women is that they're targeted towards girls and women, whereas it's a power problem. People are exercising control in ways that they shouldn't, so most of the programs should really be targeted towards boys and men.
You can aptly think, well, this is about changing women's lives, but just equally important, it's about changing men's lives. From personal experience, I can say that boys who grow up to be abusive men are unhappy. and they themselves have miserable lives. And if we can change those boys so that they can have a full future, and that those girls who become their friends and their partners and their family members, they can have a positive future, the impact is not just about changing domestic violence, it's about changing violence worldwide.
We were making this game for 10 to 12-year-old boys. Basically, we picked that age because they're at a point where they're starting to value their friends and their peers more than their family, and also physiologically their hormones are starting to develop, so it's at a time when they would be interested in women.
We need to be creating a scenario that the players can identify with and really feel like it's something that they understand and it's part of their culture. One of the only ways we could find that could really target such a large demographic and still get that quality was to use soccer, which is a worldwide sport, and it has a worldwide culture that crosses national boundaries and everything. FIFA, for instance, has a very large initiative towards using soccer to change the world for the better. They have this set of rules called the FIFA Fair Play Code, and we kind of were using some of that as reference materials for ourselves and just kind of riding on that initiative.
The goals of the project are to use the Sabito methodology in a way that it's never been used before, and to use their steps of getting somebody to understand a problem, getting them to recognize that they're capable of addressing the problem in their own personal life, and then eventually actually changing their behavior in a positive way, and even advocating for other people to make those same changes. And we do this through a game that's primarily entertainment but also has education woven into the background. And a lot of the content of the game, even if it is entertainment, has to somehow focus on the issue of violence against women.
So many games for change out there that have been made in the past were sort of premised on the notion that we need to educate people who have a lot of affluence and have computers about something going on in another part of the world. So they're made with that presumption that the person who is playing the game is not the same person as the one experiencing the issue being talked about in the game. And that is extremely different for our game. We're making a game that is meant to reach people all around the world and give the message directly to those people and change their behavior about that subject.
The art production team designed a process that allows them to create characters very rapidly, art assets very rapidly.
We're using two pipelines actually. We're using separate ones for characters and environments. The environment one essentially will set up a scene in Maya and render out the wireframe from that scene and then paint in Photoshop and ArtRage over that. The character side of things is much more in-depth. We'll start with character concepts. We'll start modeling the character, make sure that it's acceptable for rigging and animation. Once we have the rigged character, we'll pose it correctly for what the artists dictate the scene will need, and then from that pose we'll render it out and composite it against our background. Previously we had thought that we'd be able to hand draw essentially the characters every frame for every scene that we're going to do, but we potentially will have hundreds of scenes, and it's not viable for us to hand draw those.
My chief focus has been conducting a pre-test. Basically, we're testing storyline elements and aspects of the art in the game. This game has to essentially apply to a lot of the world. Sort of trying to test out with some refugee kids at the local Winooski Middle School. The kids did understand the investment of points. They did understand the rules of the game, but we had some disconnects where when they didn't care, they stopped learning. It's going to be really important. It looks shiny, it looks bright. They like that they take their first look at it and they say, that looks interesting, that looks fun. Because the kids that didn't have that impression when they looked at this, they sort of just shut off and didn't care.
Teens and young adults are really looking for sites that offer them a community where they can talk to a lot of people, they can share their interests and find people that have similar interests as them. One of the great things about having it on the web is we can see how people are talking about the game, where they're sharing it, how they're sharing it, and we can track all this so we can really see the progress of the game. The release of the game is still in the distant future. We're still exploring social mediums to see which ones are the best ones to release the games on. Right now, the most widespread technology is a cell phone, especially in developing countries. Families use their cell phone to replace things like computers, TVs, game consoles, and they do everything on their cell phone from playing games to communicating to even mobile banking. So we hope to release the game on the mobile cell phone so that people can, all over the world can use it. When I think about my trip to South Africa, I think about the day that we visited the school in the townships. The first full day we were there, we went on a tour through this township called Langa. As we were walking through, all of a sudden all these kids just kept running up to us and they wanted to hold our hands, they wanted to use our cameras, they wanted to talk to us. It was the first time that a face was actually put to this project. Seeing these little boys and these little girls and seeing that, you know, this is a big problem and this is something that we do need to change. Was really inspiring to me. When I asked her what she wanted to do when she grew up, she said, I want to be a doctor. I want to be the one to find the cure for AIDS. And she was really super passionate about this. And I mean, every time I think about it, even now, like, it's like, will she ever have the chance?
I'd say the concept really excites me because every time I think about this project and explain it to other people, I just like smile. It's like, what am I doing? Well, I'm using what I'm learning in school to help prevent violence against women in developing countries, and that just feels good.
This, though it seems really small at the time, like it's Champlain College, it's a video game project, but it's with the United Nations working on a project to affect something bigger than you could ever imagine being a part of.
It's a great opportunity. It's world-changing, you know, if we successfully complete this, and I think that we have a good chance of doing that.
I'm here at Champlain because I'm an educator. I'm on this project because I want to make a difference. And the fact that you could take both of those things and find one project to work on that helps do both. Professionally speaking, I can't imagine anything better than that.
And to my very left, we got a person that you might maybe know with the name Mood, but actually Christopher Poole. And when I did research this afternoon about you, I found some really amazing quotes on you and your work. Like there is one that I really liked. It's, if you read 4chan that you founded, and if you go to the random board, reading it will melt your brain. I found it interesting that your real name was relieved in 2008 by the Wall Street Journal.
And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Jamie Warren of Killscreen Media.
Hello, how's everyone doing? Good, good, good. All right, thanks for coming out today on Sunday. My name is Jamin Warren. Actually, if we can pull the presentation up, there we go. My name is Jamin Warren. I'm the founder of a video game arts and culture company called Killscreen. Just give you a little bit of background on us. I used to be a reporter at the Wall Street Journal. I covered arts and entertainment for them for about 5 years. Got really interested in games around 2008. Games have kind of experienced a real renaissance in terms of the people who are making them and the types of experiences that they're seeking to deliver. So I started Killscreen, which initially started as a magazine. The magazine became a website. We have a weekly playlist, which a bunch of the creators that you'll see today, some of their games have been featured on. It's just a weekly selection of the best games that are out there. We do our own conference in New York, and I host a show for PBS Digital Studios called Game Show. So we're actually... I believe that gameplay can change real-world behavior. What games do really well is bring a lot of different parts, certainly through creating games also.
I found it interesting that your real name was relieved in 2008 by the Wall Street Journal.
So it's cool that you can have a sliding scale that way. Right. Next question, right there.
What is your favorite difficult game, and who playtests your games?
We started recording here about the stigma that comes along with being self-identified as a gamer, and we'll get a little more into that in a few minutes, but I want to quickly talk about the conference that Killscreen is putting together. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, last year we did it for the first time. It's called 256. It's in Brooklyn, New York on May 16th, and it's a games, arts, and culture conference. And, you know, I've been to lots of game conferences, and, you know, they typically run, there are two different types. There's kind of like big public fan fests, you know, so there's E3 and PAX and Tokyo Game Show and Gamescom, and then there's kind of industry-centric stuff, so like the DICE conference in Las Vegas or the Game Developers Conference. And I wanted to do something, particularly here in New York City, that would kind of be in between those two worlds, with a particular eye towards getting people who maybe wouldn't be associated with games, getting them in the conversation with game designers. So last year, you know, we had folks like the founder of 4chan, Chris Poole, was on stage with behavioral psychologist Jeff Lynn from Riot Games, who works on League of Legends, managing online communities.
Right.
Hey, I'm Gotham from the Google Creative Lab in New York. My question is about the whole idea of incentivizing behavior. Most of the conversations that I've heard of usually put incentives in one or two buckets. One is either authorship, the other is some sort of monetary or some sort of other gamification incentive. The interesting thing that I find when it comes to collaborative creation is I did a little bit of work on memes. And in mimetic creation, and I'm sure this whole room is aware of Hipster Ariel. So Hipster Ariel is an example where nobody's creating a new Hipster Ariel image for authorship. Because nobody in the world is going to find out that Mike here made a Hipster Ariel meme. They're also not doing it for any other sort of monetary incentive. They're just doing it for the pure joy of making fun of this thing with 4 other people who also find it funny. So the act of collaborative creation is more satisfying to them than the result of that collaborative creation. They're not there to create the best Hipster Ariel meme there is. They're just in there to make that joke with 15 other people. So isn't collaboration itself, or collaboration with people like me, itself an incentive? Have you seen that come across anywhere?
Well,
you can think of it that way too.
I do think it's worth noting that you know, there are other communities that are using, who are, I think BuzzFeed is a good example of that, where they take work that other people have done and then that takes on a new type of currency within the BuzzFeed community. And so that's a situation where perhaps the original genesis of a particular meme, in this case Hipster Ariel, there was no kind of you know, outward reward. But I do think that you find other communities that sort of wait for those things to happen, and they say, all right, now I'm going to be the person on BuzzFeed who's the first person to seed this, in a way that's very different from, say, like 4chan, for example, where there's no credit given to anyone ever at any time, forever and ever. I mean, when that goes off, those people who've been engaging with each other. And that's an interesting circumstance in which the collaborative part on 4chan is totally anonymous and people don't even know who the other, like, it's totally naked, right? Where you're not even talking to the same set of people, which is always kind of interesting, right? When 4chan eventually goes silent someday, there will be all these millions of people who never know each other's names.